morning, everybody. Thank you for coming to our first of 3 panels that we're going to be delivering at the Scan booth here at BETT 2025. Really happy to be here. We've got some special guests today that I will introduce in a moment. But quickly, my name is Jodi Nelson-Tabor. I am with Final Pixel, which is a creative innovation agency and filmworks company. And we work in virtual production with in-camera VFX, LED walls. We also have our World Builders team who builds out all of our virtual environments and beautiful assets that maybe we'll see later today, and also in education. So I'm the head of the academy, and we skill up and train people to who are getting into the industry, maybe early career graduates from universities, or professional crew who have had a few years in the industry but need to skill up into real-time technology. And so I'm here today with my special guest from Westminster University. We have Gregory Sporton, who is the head of college at Westminster, and Elizabeth Allen, who is the principal lecturer and academic lead for CreaTech. And the aim of our panel today is to really look at how industry and education should have a really strategic alliance for all of the converging technologies that are coming into the industry at a very, very fast pace. How do we address skilling up our students, skilling up our staff, looking at infrastructure, bringing in technology, and also skilling up your community that you work with as well. And so I guess one of the first questions I want to talk about is, you don't have a stage yet, so I just want to you're at kind of the beginning journey. Which is great, but obviously students are starting to look at virtual production, real-time technology, and this is also not just in film, but it's in games, live events, creative arts. And so I would like to just kind of give a scope of what your overall kind of program is for context, and then what is the direction of travel you guys are looking at for this technology?
Okay, so I'll do the broader picture on this. The college runs across a whole range of parts of the creative industry, so it includes fine art and lots of other areas of the creative arts, including gaming, but also we've got a strong presence in areas like music and architecture and computer science. So we've got, if you like, a mixture of long-standing specialist subject areas that have been very used to, it's a university after all, very used to developing their facilities for the specific needs of students. The technological environment in most universities is pretty good. And most of us spend a lot of time thinking about how we can develop that further and how we can make that work for students, particularly seeing that the demands of industry change, and obviously that's right. I think one of the key aspects of being sure that we've got the right technological environment is one where what we're seeing is kind of what you've just described, is this convergence of a range of technologies, particularly visual tech, if you like, and the virtual production tech in particular, that has both a technical impact on what people do, but it also has a side of sort of without wanting to make too much of this, but there is also a philosophical impact, as it were. That's not to say that our filmmaking or games designing students are turning into philosophers, but it does change what gets produced. So from that perspective, it's really important for all universities to keep a very strong eye on, or a very sharp eye on what the demand is from industry, or what industry are working with. And often industry are very, they're really interested in cutting edge technologies, which can be a really difficult investment. We find this difficult too. We're not, our pockets aren't bottomless, but it's also interesting because we've got a research dimension to what we do, to see that one of the things that we've got to do is engage with those cutting edge technologies, and sometimes even develop them, which also happens in university environments. But what we see pretty much is that the big picture is the convergence of those visual technologies, particularly around virtual production, the convergence of those across a very large range of subjects, and the importance of us researching and I wouldn't say understanding, but I would say exploring what the possibilities are for them. And I think they're the big things that they're on my mind when I'm thinking about how we develop what we do, what we invest in, and what the new subject domains or new parts of old subject domains we would need to develop happen to be. Is there anything you want to add to that, or did you hear much of that?
So I guess, we have a CreaTech group across the college, and one of the things that we're looking at is really how to bring these different disciplines together. Virtual production's an obvious technology because it sort of requires this convergence of, computer science, filmmaking, arts, media. That's also one of the challenges. So often these disciplines have kind of grown up separately, and to get them to start working together and find ways in which we can get them developing curriculum together, that's one of the things that we need to work on. I think the other area is the upskilling. So that's something that has really come up from talking to staff, their confidence, both academic and technical staff, around using these technologies. We need a kind of ongoing sort of program of training. We have a pod. We've got a virtual production pod, and we have our technicians effectively running virtual production with green screen at the moment. And our next plan is to get a larger screen so that we can actually work within one of our studios. So
it's probably worth adding to that actually we've been working with you, Jodi, with Final Pixel on upskilling staff. People go through different periods in their careers, as it were, and they usually start off with one skill set, and they will need to develop more as time goes on, as there's various changes. And I think that's an important part of learning that academics do as much as students do. But we've been really grateful for the partnership. The point of investing in that training is just as important as investing in the kit and the infrastructure, because again, it isn't that the technology is kind of neutral or something. The technology lends itself to certain kinds of things and perhaps a little less to others. And as a consequence, if colleagues where they have the direct experience of developing their skills in this tech, one of the things that happens is that they start to think about it differently. That means they start to think in different ways when they're discussing those things with students. And that's really, really important, because the students aren't and shouldn't be satisfied with an old-fashioned model of how movies were made in the 90s or something. I mean, that's just not good enough. Particularly noting that amongst the big things that have taken place, really in 21st century filmmaking, a lot of the big things that have taken place have really enabled a much broader group of people to both experience and kick on to careers. That wouldn't be possible if we stuck with celluloid. Okay, we all know that. So that I think there is always in the technologies embedded in them somewhere is often a kind of hidden gem for us all, where we will have the opportunity for expanding the group of people who deal with this stuff. And of course, the wider that group is, the more interesting the stuff they'll produce will be. And the more unlikely often the kinds of things that might get produced as a result will be. So the training piece, it's not just a question of taking students through things. It's also a question of upskilling our colleagues so that they understand not just the nuts and bolts of how it fits together, but through the experience of making with it, they then come out with a different perspective.
Oh gosh, so many questions and places to start. You touched on the staff training. We spoke earlier about the storytelling course that you teach in terms of like first year students getting exposure to all of this technology. And also one of the really wonderful things about coming to university and being able to learn these technologies is you have a place to play and to explore. And while the education is not standardized yet, and may not be because it's moving so fast, there is that element, that philosophical element that you talked about that is important to not only learn the tech and understand the tech, but also the driver behind the why and what you can do with it. We've talked about techniques, stacking, and developing students who have a holistic viewpoint and a not necessarily a generalist, but have a wide range of skills that make them very unique to and very skilled to be able to be versatile and agile in an industry that's shifting very much. So what do you guys, how do you prepare your students for that?
I think that's a really interesting question. It's one of the things that has been a bit of a challenge for us because, as I said, disciplines grow up and they tend to grow up in a kind of vertical way and they develop along that discipline, and actually getting people to work across disciplines can be difficult. We've been working through our CreaTech group and in our conversations with industry to kind of establish what those skills are that we need, and obviously part of VP is a really interesting example of an area where art and tech are coming together. So the skills around creativity, storytelling, all of that sort of thing, they're very, very well developed within the arts, within filmmaking, within fine art, visual communication. The tech skills tend to be much more focused on computer science and games, and bringing those together. We're looking at sort of developing curriculum models where we bring those students together, and they may have more of a focus in the arts, or they might have more of a focus in the kind of science and technology. But there are some skills that they all need, and we want to find ways of doing that. So some of those skills that we've looked at are kind of interdisciplinary collaborative skills, working in groups, a lot of the kind of soft skills, and that's certainly the sort of feedback we get more generally from CreaTech industry is that those soft skills are what employers are looking for. So ability to collaborate, ability to project manage, kind of working with others, understanding the kind of different languages of different disciplines. That's what we need to do, but it's quite a different way of looking at education and particularly degrees. So
I would just add a couple of things to that, because I think that's only part of the story. I think the other part of the story is the ability to learn and to understand when there is a new frontier to learn. And so the cycle of continuous learning, which some of us, I don't know, for whatever reason, we picked up early on. But for other people, it's much more of a struggle to understand the importance of seeing a new opportunity, and VP is a really good example of this. And being capable of picking up and understanding the principles as quickly as possible in order to exploit the moment. I think one of the things that's underestimated, there's two big things around this really. One of the things that's underestimated is the impact, for example, of a technology like virtual production on storytelling itself. So for years, plenty of screenwriters will self-censor from big shots because they can't afford them. Yeah, they know that. Yeah, so they write a script that does not include, sort of the mass ranks of the Ethiopian army marching, being marched as prisoners into Luxor or something. They just won't do that. And I think with virtual production, what that's enabled exactly those people to do is just think much more broadly. So there will be another generation of screenwriters and storytellers who aren't going to be limited in that way to what they've thought of are the budgetary constraints of doing your Cecil B. DeMille production. I think that's really exciting. I think that's going to make a big difference. Suddenly I can hear myself. But the other thing, and it sort of touches, it's a development really from what Liz has talked about, and we see this a lot when new technologies meet creative processes. There has been for far too long a notion that somehow or other these technical processes and these creative processes belong to some kind of separate domain. And for many of us who've worked in, who've worked in these environments, we've understood for many years that that's just not true. That your capacity to create with them is going to be, to some extent, dependent on your technological understanding of what the platform looks like. So if you like, the old days, of the really old days of the sort of two cultures, that there's an arts culture and a science culture, I think that's practically dead. And it's how but there's still the residual of that within the culture for young people before they come to university. They started doing arts because they were rubbish at maths. Well, actually, it's not a position to say you're just a rubbish at maths. that, you know, at the end of the day, that is really about your overarching understanding of your own education. And I think that that's going to be very challenging for, if you like, the secondary school system, where it's got to find ways to reconcile these things, maybe teach some of this stuff better. That would be really helpful. But they do have to find ways in which those things are properly reconciled if, by the time they get to university, for us to really be able to help them, they have to have some of those threshold skills, and they have to understand the unity of that process that is not that's not a defined creative one that fits out there separately from the tech, and we'll get some techies in to sort this out. That is not a long-term strategy.
And I think, as you pointed out, virtual production is probably one of the best use cases for demonstrating how that works, because typically VFX is in post-production, happens after the decision making. You know, it's difficult for production to mitigate the risks and runaway budgets. So with this technology, we've been able to bring that to the front of the house. And what that has enabled all of the departments working within a film project or a media project is that you have a greater sense of agency and people understanding the technology with which they're working within to be able to make the right creative decisions for that project. As opposed to just trying to fit it into a piece of technology, and that delineates, you know, perhaps your creative innovation or your ideation. And I think the exposure for students to be able to understand that, instead of just, well, I don't want to be a technician or whatever, but it's also those overlapping transferable skills. You know, you quite often, I remember when I was working at the university, students would come in first year and go, I want to be a director. That's all I want to do. They all want to be directors. But what's really wonderful is when they are exposed to new technologies and new creative opportunities and see career trajectories and career paths, and also that they can actually now maneuver across multiple industries, which offers more job opportunities, particularly in the freelance sector. I think that's got to be really exciting. So it's our education body that is in preparation, and everything that we've been talking about is there's lots of things that have to be put in place. De-siloing university departments, making sure the staff have appropriate training, making sure students have exposure to that technology, and where that technology is not available yet is how does that industry collaboration happen. So talk to me a bit about how do you go around collaborating with industry? What kind of obstacles or challenges are you still trying to get around to enable that to happen?
Well, Liz will almost certainly have more to say about this than me, but I've got plenty. So it's, you know, just warning everybody. One of the things that certainly has been part of our journey in all this was starting with industry collaborations. I think because we saw the opportunities, if you like, but we weren't exactly sure, you know, what they kind of looked like. And so a lot of it was talking to people who are developing small, medium-sized enterprises that are part of the food chain of the industry. That was revelatory for a few reasons. One was looking at their business models and what it was that was keeping them afloat. One was how they, how they got a return on their investment, because their business planning was often very bold and risky. There was some support at governmental level, and there was some kind of modest opportunities like zoning and stuff like this, and that's important when you're running a business and you've got mouths to feed. It's really important. But what we also saw when we saw that was, very efficient models by which people could be trained and upskilled and doing the work as swiftly as the client might demand. So understanding how that client relationship works is quite important. It's often a thing that we miss out in higher education. The other thing that I would say that I think we're very much alive to now is the potential for much more robust collaboration over how we develop facilities, how we develop approaches to large-scale problems in the industry, because we are, at the end of the day, we're very large businesses that can do that which we absolutely see that medium-sized enterprises who are running a VP stage, say, or doing some AR, VR work or something, they can't lobby on behalf of industry particularly effectively. There are some fantastic lobbying organizations within the industry, and that's really important, and they've been really successful at getting things like tax breaks for the industry and what have you. But where there's more structural issues about, well, who does this work, about why this work is of economic importance, about what the potential impact on long-term impact is on the economy, well, that's not stuff that most SMEs are going to be interested in. They just want to be sure that they're paying the bills, and we've got a responsibility really to use the gravitas that we've got to be sure that we do the lobbying, that we do the research that enables people to understand what the facts are on the ground, and I think those things are really important. That's kind of my interpretation, and I would say that because I'm so keen on how the policy framework develops. But Liz, no doubt you've got some other things to say on that one.
So I think there's a question around how we work with industry, and we see industry as being really key. They've been really, really important to us in helping to inform us around what the needs are in terms of curriculum, student skills, and I think there are opportunities to develop partnerships that benefit both sides. So the one thing that industry definitely can give us is the technology, and the often universities are not so quick in investing in it, and what industry can do is it can provide that kind of very quick change and response to technology and spaces and a kind of industry environment. In terms of getting our students industry ready, we have a really big focus on work-based learning within the university, so we have kind of built-in work placements across all of our undergrad courses, and optional year out. So we're very keen to work with industry on that. I think there are other opportunities around training as well, and certainly industry is helpful, and you have been very helpful for us with training our staff, but it's worth looking at where we can do that in partnership, and where we can, there can be a benefit from the university to industry and small business as well. So, sorry.
That's a great thing, because I think, again, industry can also benefit from the university partnership in terms of R&D. You talk about a lot of this really heavy lifting for tech adoption. Small SMEs quite often have very limited funds for R&D, have a very small staff and very limited time. And so that partnership is really key, particularly for new emerging tech. In our case, we do lots of R&D partnerships with different universities and different organizations in sort of different areas of the supply chain across the whole entire workflow, because so many of them require constant upskilling ourselves and constant new adoptions, or a new change or a new version of Unreal that comes out every 3 months, right? So the other thing that you mentioned was the tech advice, the tech consultation for what kind of investment should we make. But I think there's also about the labor. And we've seen quite a lot of technical staff who have been skilled up. They know how to run the studio, and then industry comes along and swipes them away for 3 times their salary, leaving you guys in a lurch. So how do you, keep talent retention? How do you make sure and maintain that robustness so that your staff is getting similar experiences that they would be in industry, but maybe in an environment where that innovation and R&D is built into their job that they wouldn't necessarily have an opportunity to do in industry? And then how do you also get your students to come back and be a part of that larger community when they're finished graduating?
So I think that's a really interesting question that we've been thinking about quite a lot. I think the second part is easier to answer, that actually we find that our students, once they go out into industry, they're often very willing to come back as alumni and do guest lectures with our current students, and that can be a really, really good way of kind of helping our students to understand the industry, the possibilities they have in terms of careers, the very different ways in which students have taken the skills that they've learned at university and then kind of the directions they've gone in. So that in itself is something that we've got that's quite well established. I think the other question in terms of hanging on to staff, that's really what you're talking about, and technical staff, and I think that is a problem because techs can be paid a lot more in industry than within education. We've been talking about how we add value for our staff, and we're talking about academics as well, really, in this territory. And one of the things that we've started discussing is developing continued professional development in these sorts of areas. So thinking about training within emerging tech, I mean, not just for tech within the disciplines, but also tech within education, and kind of, you know, the next big thing is likely to be, is already AI, but also augmented and virtual reality in the classroom, all of those sorts of things. So that's one of the things that we're looking at as an opportunity to kind of think about, you know, helping our staff, helping them to develop their skills, hopefully hanging on to them as well, but you know, giving them an environment where we are very tech focused, and that becomes part of our USP, really.
What she said.
It goes back full circle to what you said at the beginning. How do we help our staff and our community beyond just the technical adoption? It's a philosophical thing, right? It's about providing opportunities for all. And if staff are constantly upskilling and have the opportunity to innovate, to try and explore, then that gets passed to the students. And then the students are benefiting, obviously, from the expertise and the knowledge as well.
One of the things that we've done, and I think pretty successfully really, is to train our technical staff and our academics together. So rather than allowing this sort of split as if somehow or other some people... I mean, it comes back to what I said earlier about reducing the space between what's thought of as creative ambition and technological capacity. So really trying to reconcile both those areas together. We took a very deliberate decision to make sure that every time we had a round of training in a new technology that people were unfamiliar with, we would always start from a position that a whole bunch of people need to do this together. As a means of trying to build a team. Liz said this a bit earlier about the skills of collaboration, and whilst we're very big with students having the skills of collaboration, not all academics have very good skills of collaboration. Technicians can be guilty of this as well, where you know, they feel like there's a technological demand or a technological a kind of teleology that they've got to follow, where actually if we all sat back a bit more and listened a bit more, we might end up having, you know, discovering much more about what the potential is of the situation and enjoying what we do a lot more. And I think that's a bit, for me, that's quite crucial in people, in retaining the intellectual investment that we've made in those people. And it's very practical in a way. It's very practical. And if people feel that their jobs are developing and that they're developing along with things that are happening outside, then they can be quite comfortable with that. I think where they see a gap between what they know and what happens in the industry, I think that might be the point where the panic buttons get pressed. So, you know, to try to assure people that we're aware of their needs and aware of the kind of direction in which we're going, I think being very upfront about that is very important.
That's great. So, some really great points today that are ongoing conversations. Yes, always. On a kind of last question, from where you are today, you've got some really great vision, some great things that you're trying to solve. What do you think the next year, couple of years is going to look like based on what you're trying to aim? I'm going to start with Liz and then I'll come back to you.
So we're really looking at what direction we go in within CreaTech. So we're looking across kind of the whole sort of horizon of CreaTech across all of our disciplines. We are looking at where we can start to develop curriculum that is relevant, that is along the lines of what we've been talking about, where we can start to share curriculum. We're continuing to fundraise for training for our staff, and we're looking at developing a structure for that will become something that we can move forward with. And then really continuing conversations with industry and really looking at industry partnerships and how as we develop, how we can turn that into a network that's really sort of mutually beneficial, really helps to kind of focus our curricula and our students on employability. And so getting a very clear idea of what the opportunities are within that area. So I think we see that it has to be done in partnership with industry, and that's really what we want to do. That's what we're doing over the next year.
I would agree with that 100%, although I'm the research guy. So the big thing that I really want to do is that partnership with industry. I want us to be able to work with them and raise the capital to make sure that we can investigate quite a lot more than we currently are and get behind some big ideas. And because I think that's the thing. People get beguiled by the capacity of the technology of the moment, but there is a future. And it's us working, evolving together with our industry partners into what that future is going to look like. How do we morph into that? As I said at the very beginning, there's an awful lot of convergence around this. So this is going to be quite a fascinating period for the next 18 months, 2 years. I would think that many of the base technologies will be developed now, that those things that will be in people's living rooms in 5 years' time, perhaps even less. So really, for me, I really want to be working with our researchers and our industry partners on tomorrow.
Great visions. Lots of work to do. Yeah, keep us busy for a while. But thank you very much, Gregory. Thank you, Elizabeth, for coming today. I hope everybody enjoyed it, and we'll see you again tomorrow.